Books, 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 books. Welcome back. About a month ago, I rediscovered the title of a book that I had been looking for since I read it, like when I was in the second grade. It's one of those books that I remembered the plot vaguely, that I remember like kind of the vibes, but I didn't remember the name because it happened so long ago. I've been looking for this book for years, and a couple weeks ago I found it. And it really just got me thinking. It got me thinking about the books that it got me thinking about the books that inspire us to read, and how the feelings that we carry on with them last longer than the book itself. You know, books that stick with you across decades, literally. I have a group of books that reached me at various stages in my life, but that stuck in my brain. When I was young, I was not a big reader. I honestly hated reading for a very long time, until I was in about the 5th grade. But that didn't stop there from being books that impacted me. It didn't matter that I hated books. There are still books that I remember that I have held on to, and that have honestly pushed me into the person that I am today and the reader that. So I wanted to take an exploration. I wanted to turn the clock back and explore these books that I have remembered. I have not reread any of these books since the very first time that I read them. All I have is my original impression of these books. I don't have my evolved reader impression. So I have a stack, as you can see, of 4 books here that are waiting to be read, waiting to be re-explored. We're gonna go through them in the same order that I read through them growing up. We start, obviously, with the picture book. This is the book that taught me how to read. It was my favorite book growing up when I was like 3 and 4. One of the only ones that I remember. Maybe Chicka Chicka Boom Boom is another one, but Miss Spider's Tea Party. It's a picture book about Miss Spider and her tea party. I believe this author, David Kirk, he made a lot of things in the series, because I know there's Miss Spider's ABCs, which I also had as a kid. I have so many vivid memories of tiny me carrying this book around in both of my hands to each of my parents, asking them to read it, and eventually I could read it on my own. And so I thought, what a lovely way to start this off than to an ode to the very, very book that got me to read, literally. Next is the most intense of the whole list, funnily. In the 2nd grade, this book is one of the first that I ever remember there being like a book with real plot. That wasn't Charlotte's Web, of course. You know, you read all the basics in the 1st and the 2nd grade. My teacher sat down and read this book to us. This book opened up the door. I didn't step through it because, like I said, I hated books until like the 5th grade. But this book opened up the door and showed me that there was a pathway down this world of creation, of writing, of reading. Because it was like the first story like that had ever so deeply impacted me emotionally. And that book is Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. This is quite a popular book, especially around my area. A lot of people that live locally to me, this is a very popular book in Salt Lake City area. I don't know. 2nd grade teacher read this book to us, and my 2nd grade class was a rambunctious class. I was even on one of those little like ADHD trackers where I would have to get a sticker at lunch and a sticker at the end of the day if I was doing good, and if I wasn't, then I would get a not good sticker. The only moments of peace, of quiet, of silence in that entire year was this. It's a story about a boy and his 2 hunting dogs and their life together. It is an extremely sad book. I think Old Yeller vibes, if you catch my gist. This class of like 30 second graders enraptured for the entire thing. Every every time after lunch we were begging, like, please, I want to know what happens next. I want to know what happens next. And I don't think I had ever felt like that about a book before. And I've never forgot it. I've never forgot this book. I've never forgot the experience hearing my teacher read it to us. I picked up this copy at a vintage store last year because it's the exact copy that my teacher read us. Of all of them, this is probably the one that I am the most excited to reread. Next, we have my first mystery. I still have no idea why this book stuck out to me so much, but I remember checking it out from my library in the 3rd grade, might have been the 4th, and sitting down and reading it and just being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I remember sitting in my class's reading time, like silently freaking out so that people would pay attention to me and I could tell them how good this book was. Makings of a book lover, you know, type of vibe. And this is the book that I had forgot. This is the book that I remembered the plot, I remembered kind of vaguely the vibes, and I could not remember the title for the life of me. So this is the book that I have been searching for years. It is Tarot Says Beware by Betsy Byers. It is a Herculia Jones mystery. I don't know if it sounds familiar. It sounds like, you know, another kid's mystery series like Nancy Drew, or, you know, the usual. This book is a book about a fortune teller who owns a parrot and ends up dead. That was all I remembered. And I searched and searched, and then I was like sitting watching TV and I was like, Tarot. The bird's name was Tarot, was it? And I found it. I found the title. I am a genius. I accessed my interior knowledge system and I got it. It was like a little piece of dust in my brain, you know, that just I couldn't wipe away because I didn't know the title, and I couldn't clear it out because, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And now the dust is cleared and I can read this book. And finally, this one holds a very, very special place because this is the book that got me into reading. Like I said, after so many years growing up and just hating reading, wanting nothing to do with it, throwing and, you know, getting rid of every book that was tossed my way, and struggling through every assigned reading book, we have Ginger Pie by Eleanor S. This is a book about a little dog, about a pair of siblings who get a little fox terrier as a pet. It turns into a mystery unexpectedly. Lots of unanswered questions and suspicious people, surprisingly, and that is what I remember. And I think that was why this book captivated me so much so, because my teacher wasn't giving me a reading assignment, but we had to give ourselves a book. So this was the book I picked. I literally went to my teacher's bookshelf, looked at the book, the like 50 books on it, and picked one of them. Honest to God, literally changed my life. I'm hoping to find out exactly why. I went into this book thinking it was going to be boring and that it was going to be full of just nothing and nothing exciting, and it totally completely flipped my expectations because it portrays itself as like a cozy, cute, like fun family story, and it turns really intense. At least from what I remember. That flip truly captivated me as a reader, and I remember putting it down and being like, can other books do that? Lo and behold, they can. And here we are 15 years later, and I've never reread this book. Never reread any of these since I originally read them, despite them making such an impact on me. I'm really hoping to see insight into little Natalie, into the young reading hater me and who she might have been, so that it can give me that kind of perspective of how much I've changed, how much I've grown, how much reading has impacted who I am and where I've gone in my life. I know you can't really tell all of that from a few books that you read in elementary school, but I'm certainly going to try. So let's get started. Literally before I've even opened the book, the end papers. I used to play games. I used to count these. Like, I used to. Wow, this is so crazy, man. Okay, I just finished Miss Spider's Tea Party. It's amazing how much imagery inspires memory, because I feel like I was remembering so many tiny memories as I was going through the images in the book. Especially the one where she's crying. I feel like I remember being little and trying to like wipe away her tears every time I read that part. I remember, it was a counting book. So I used to count the bugs in the end papers, and I used to go 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, count each of the bugs on the page. And that was really beautiful. That was a really lovely 10 minutes. She noticed 3 things. The door to Madame Rose's house was opened. Madame Rose's parrot had flown outside and was now perched on one of the porch rockers. Her hair was beginning to frizzle. She thought, now I know something's wrong. Her hair always did this when there was danger. Meat had once called it radar hair, and she had smiled. Herculia wasn't smiling now. Okay, so there's a mime in this book. There's a kid, and his name is Meat, and he hates the mime. Okay, stay with me. He's communicating that there's been a murder to this mime. The mime now went into various possibilities. He clutched his hands to his throat, strangling himself. He shot an imaginary pistol at himself and gripped his stomach in pain. He drank poison and rolled his eyes up into his head. He stabbed himself in the chest. Meat nodded quickly and stabbed his own chest. He gave a shiver of disgust at himself for falling into the mime's trap. He had seen it happen often at the park. A perfectly normal person would be tricked into an imaginary tug-of-war with an invisible rope, or pulling a piece of invisible string out of the mime's mouth, or putting an imaginary coin in the mime's back. I finished. And it was cute. It was fun. Definitely maybe a little too young for my normal tastes. But it wasn't like a mystery in that, like, you have to put the clues together to figure out what's going on. It was more so like a mystery of, like, oh, what's happening? Oh, what's happening? Oh, what's happening? Like, again and again and again and again. It's more like a thrill ride than a mystery. When reading this, I guess I just only remembered the feeling that this book gave me when I was young. So it's interesting to think about, because I really remembered this book as being amazing. I remembered just thinking it was the craziest thing, and I don't think I had ever really read an actual mystery before, and so I think that was why it was so crazy, because it was like one of the first things like that I ever read. You never remember the things that a person did for you, just the way they made you feel. How romantic and poetic. It is. It's very sweet and interesting to think of.
I said, but I don't anymore. I don't like the people there and couldn't understand them.
I am enjoying this so much, actually. The writing is so plain, yet intriguing. I don't know, it just pulls you in. Although it was written in 1961, it doesn't normally drone on like a book from the 60s because it's written for YA. So that makes me wonder, do older YA books have like a higher level of consumability than older regular books? I am 46 pages in and I'm really enjoying it. I've honestly been putting off a reread of this because I know how much it's absolutely going to destroy me when I finish it. But this is fun. This is good and very summery too. I always say that kids literature needs to scare kids a little. That's just intense, man. That's so intense, and an intensity to which I was not expecting. I don't know, but something is so simply enjoyable about the writing style. It's not complicated or convoluted or anything. It's so just like simple and beautiful in the way that it describes things, and it really, really, really just it pulls you in. And I'm almost finished. I'm really enjoying it, and I will get back to you when I'm done. Bro, this is so fucked up. Oh my god. This is a fucking spoiler, so skip to this. But like, this is so fucked up. This paragraph is so fucked up. This is so fucked up. What the fuck? Hi. Books about love, man. They always get me. It's what I search for every day. It's hard not to think of this as one of the first stories about love that I ever encountered, or that at least I ever remembered. A beautiful reading experience. Way more enjoyable than I expected. It's a beautiful story. It really is. I'm sad. Some spoilers. Skip here. I think it's really interesting how the climax happened and then Billy's dogs only passed away after the climax. The death wasn't the climax. The death was the end of the story. The death wasn't the pivot point. It wasn't the changing point of all things. The love and the success and the joy were. And then the death was simply just the end of the story. And the beginning of another one. That's such a beautiful way to write something like that. You know, it's just, really common because it's a great writing tactic, to keep a reader hooked. Character deaths and things like that tied to the important parts of the story. But that's not what this is here. It's presented much more simply than that. Honestly, it was a cathartic reading experience. Everything is so beautifully wrapped up despite its short and sweetness. There's no embellishment. There's no fancy veils or twisted words. It's just, it is, and the love is.
I've been stuck in limbo, thinking about the rainbow way over there. I don't have a car, so gotta take the high road if I really care. I deserve to feel much better. For weeks and weeks I face bad weather.
I really like books about dogs, I guess, because you have Where the Red Fern Grows, and then there's this, and I've always said that Marley and Me changed me forever, because I used to never cry at books and video games. I just used to never cry at stories,
And then I read Marley and Me, and I've been a foster little ever since that moment. I like it was a pivotal moment in my life. I don't know what it is about dogs that just makes them so structurally impactful in a story for me, or emotionally impactful. It's funny to see that pattern.
I've been bending backwards, seeing who would laugh first. What a big joke. This song makes my head hurt. It's no more whatever. Change up the tone. I deserve to feel much better. For weeks and weeks I face bad weather. It must be really up to me. I got a plan for what we wanna do. You wanna leave with me, I wanna be with you. Come on, let's go.
Chapter 12. Tramps and the Sunny Fields.
I got a plan for what
Okay, I just found out the plot twist in Ginger Pie, and maybe I was just a stupid ass kid, because it was very predictable. so was Taro Says Beware. So neither of them were mysteries, although not unenjoyable. Not a mystery.
I have returned after reading and learning a lot, actually. I was surprised because the other 3 books didn't really inspire nostalgia, except for maybe Where the Red Fern Grows. I don't remember the plot, I just remember what it meant to me. But this one definitely goes a little bit beyond that. It was so interesting because I just felt like every page that I was reaching was so... Every new page that I reached, like, was just immediate, like, wave of nostalgia and different memories, and so much the feeling of being a kid was bottled inside this little book. It truly reminded me of learning how to read, and it was just such a pleasant experience that I'm really happy to have partaken in. Next, Taro Says Beware, and this one was so interesting because it was very representative of my ADHD and why I enjoyed this book, because it was just like, it's not really a murder mystery. It is a what's happening kind of chaos bundle altogether, with a murder mystery thrown in there. Honestly, with how much I remember loving this book, I thought that I was going to enjoy it more. I really did, but there's honestly nothing special about it. It almost felt like it was trying to be the Westing Game, but the Westing Game has more like detective work and mystery in it, and also the Westing Game is really good. So, you know, a very hard standard to reach. To me, it makes sense why little me liked this, because that was the reason I had a hard time reading, was because I couldn't focus. And so the fact that this little chaos bundle presented itself to me honestly probably opened up my attitude towards books just a little bit. It opened the door. I didn't step through it quite yet, but it opened the door for me in reading and what reading could be. I think it was probably the least impactful of all of the other books, but mostly just because this one was never really personally impactful to me. This was just a book that I remember loving, and rediscovering it was very fun. Next is Ginger Pie. After reading this book, I spent a really long time wondering why this was the one to get me into reading, why this was the thing that, you know, lit the kindling in my reading passion. There are 2 types of slow books. There are the books you read slowly because they're boring, and there are the books that you read slowly because they feel safe. They immerse you in this beautiful world that you want to stick around in, that you want to relax in, that you want to be in, that you feel joy in. That was probably a big reason why, because like I think that I had read a lot of stories before that made me be shocked, that made me be excited, that made me be curious and things like that. But as far as I can remember, this is one of the first introductions that wasn't like, it's more character driven than it is plot driven. And I don't know if I had ever encountered something like that before. It made me feel very human. In the 5th grade, I was probably about the same age as the character. So to see my own life reflected in the pages of a book must have been really intriguing. This one very much reminded me of the childhood within me, of the small joys that I was afforded as a troubled youth, you would say. I mean, I guess that's what nostalgia is, but it was more than that. It was like I was invoking my inner child by rereading these, and by doing that, I was understanding who I was back then a little more. Each book, each page, I felt like I was, maybe placebo effect, but I felt like I was remembering how I used to be, or things that had happened, and moments of my childhood that I feel like I don't ponder often, because I think my childhood memories tend to be sadder than not. So it was really lovely to take this moment to explore my childhood memories, to explore my own childhood experiences in a joyful way, in a way that brings celebration to the growth that I've had, to the person that I've become. It really creates a juxtaposition of who I was in the very beginning of my life, who I am now, and the things that have always stayed the same. Ginger pie, not as exciting as I remember. Not as intense as I remember, not as thrilling as I remember. It didn't pack the punch that I remember. I think that's probably just because I'm older now and I know I can see the signs of a, YA mystery and who done it. But like that wasn't the focus of the experience. The focus of the experience was re-experiencing my own childhood, my own youth. It was very impactful to me in a funny way. The reading experience, honestly, not even the book. Where the red fern grows. Where the red fern grows. There's so much that I could say about this book. I could talk about how well it evokes the feelings of childhood, how well it puts you in the mindset of a child because it evokes childhood so well. I could talk about how the family is so wholesome and how so often you find young protagonists with parents that suck, where in this story they don't. They're great parents. I could talk about how the deaths in here were not the part of the climax. They were part of the end of the story, just like real life. But I think with this, I wonder if this is where my fascination with love really began. I remember being so enraptured by this book, so filled with wonder and awe reading it. And I think it was because how much love is woven into this story. Growing up, I read your required readings. I read your Charlotte's Webs and all of those. But this was something that was different and something that was very tangible to me. Looking back in retrospect now, I don't think little 2nd grade-year-old me understood what was going on or understood the impacts that were happening to me. I was just being impacted. I thought about this book for years, despite it still being another 4 years until I got into reading as a habit. But this was a story that always stuck with me because of how genuine its ponderances on love and connection and care and death, most specifically. I understand why this was a book that my 2nd grade teacher decided that she wanted to read us. I really do. Despite it being graphic in some ways, it is graphic in all the right ways, in all the ways that are impactful and that carry on with you. And in rereading it, those deep things that I've always felt were reignited within. The emotions felt new. They felt fresh, just like they did when I was a child. I do believe that I gravitated towards books that made me feel seen when I was younger. In reality, I think that's what most of the books that we pick up as we are growing up end up being, ones that we see ourselves in. So in rereading these books, I feel like I'm looking into a little window at my childhood self and understanding her just a little bit better. I felt like I was discovering the magic of reading, despite the experiences of these books spread out over such like a large period of time. I am a very different person than I was as a child. Childhood me was the extrovert that adulthood introvert me always wishes that I could be, wishes that I still was, but I'm very different in many ways. But looking back and reading these, it does seem like there's 2 things that have really stuck with me throughout all this time, and that has been Reading and Love. I'd say challenge success. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. And have a good night.